My name is Tanya Jason. I was 34 years old, 8 weeks pregnant, and standing on a beautiful hotel terrace the night my mother-in-law decided I was a liar. For an entire week, I had practiced 2 simple words. We're pregnant. I had imagined saying them over and over. I pictured smiles, happy tears, hugs, and excitement. I imagined Adam holding my hand while we shared the news with his family. But none of that happened. Instead, my mother-in-law looked at me like I was a criminal. Then she said something that changed my life forever. And 90 seconds later, I was falling. What happened after that destroyed her family, ended my marriage, and taught me something I will never forget. Before I tell you about that night, you need to know who I was before everything fell apart. The Whitlocks spent a long time telling people a story about me. The problem was that none of it was true. I was a labor and delivery nurse. I had worked in the hospital for 12 years. Most of those years were night shifts. I had helped deliver babies during snowstorms. I had comforted scared mothers. I had stayed calm during emergencies when everyone else was panicking. The job taught me something important. Pay attention. Write things down. Remember the details. That habit would save me later. When I was 29, I bought my own house. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't fancy. It was a small brick house with a crooked porch. But it was mine. I paid for it with long shifts, missed vacations, and years of hard work. Nobody gave it to me. Nobody handed me anything. I earned every piece of it myself. Then I met Adam Whitlock. We met at a hospital fundraiser. I almost didn't go that night. I was tired from work and wanted to stay home. Thankfully, I changed my mind. Adam was funny. He remembered little things. He remembered my favorite coffee. He remembered stories I told him weeks earlier. He made me laugh when I was exhausted. 2 years later, we got married. Our wedding was in my backyard. String lights hung above us. Friends and family surrounded us. It was simple and perfect. I kept my last name after the wedding. Not because I didn't love Adam. I did. But Tanya Jason was the woman who had worked for everything she owned. I wanted to keep that part of myself. Adam understood. His family didn't. The Whitlocks came from old money. The kind of money that never needed to talk about itself. The kind that quietly sat in the background and controlled everything. I didn't care about any of it. I had my job. My house. My life. I wasn't interested in their money. But that didn't stop them from being suspicious of me. Especially Patricia. Patricia Whitlock was Adam's mother. She was 62 years old and controlled the entire family. Whenever the family gathered, she sat at the head of the table. Whenever someone had a problem, they went to Patricia. Whenever decisions were made, Patricia made them. Everyone else simply followed. The family trust was worth around $10 million. Patricia controlled it. That meant she controlled everyone. Her husband Gerald followed her lead. Her daughter Brooke listened carefully to everything she said. And Adam depended on family money whenever his business struggled. At first, I didn't fully understand how much power Patricia had. I thought she was just protective. I was wrong. Before our wedding, Gerald asked us to sign a prenuptial agreement. The trust money would always belong to the Whitlocks. No matter what happened. I signed immediately. I didn't care. I wasn't marrying Adam for money. I had never wanted the trust. Honestly, I almost laughed. I already had my own house and my own paycheck. Adam looked embarrassed while I signed. Patricia looked pleased. Almost relieved. Like she had been waiting for proof that I wasn't trustworthy. I stored the signed prenup in a drawer at home. Right next to my nursing license and house deed. At the time, it felt like simple organization. Later, it would become one of the most important documents in my life. For a while, things stayed peaceful. Patricia was polite. But she watched me constantly. Every conversation felt like a test. Every family dinner felt like an interview. I kept telling myself I was imagining it. Then I got pregnant. And everything changed. I found out on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at work. I had just finished helping with a delivery. I took the test during a quick break. 2 pink lines appeared. For a moment, I simply stared. Then I started crying. Happy tears. The kind that come from pure joy. I sat alone in the bathroom holding the test and smiling. A week later, I went in for my first ultrasound. The technician turned the screen toward me. And there it was. A tiny heartbeat. Fast and strong. Small enough to fit in the palm of my hand. Yet somehow already changing my entire world. The technician printed a picture for me. I held it all the way home. I even talked to it while driving. We're going to be okay, I whispered. The photo went into a zippered pocket inside my purse. The safest pocket. The one where I kept important things. When I showed Adam, he cried. Real tears. He covered his mouth with both hands and cried. I've never forgotten that moment. For a little while, everything felt perfect. We decided to announce the pregnancy at Patricia's birthday dinner. The entire family would be there. It seemed like the perfect time. I wanted this baby to bring us together. I wanted Patricia to finally see me as family. Looking back now, that hope feels almost funny. A few days before the dinner, I ran into Brooke at a pharmacy. I told her I was excited about the celebration. Her smile disappeared for a second. Then it came back. But it looked forced. You always know how to make an entrance, she said. The comment bothered me. I couldn't explain why. Something felt strange. But I pushed the feeling away. I thought maybe I was being emotional because of the pregnancy. I had no idea I should have trusted my instincts. Saturday arrived. The party was held on the rooftop terrace of the Marlowe Hotel. The view was beautiful. String lights glowed overhead. Glass railings surrounded the terrace. Guests laughed and talked. Everything looked perfect. There were about 30 people there. Family members. Friends. Business associates. My friend Maggie came with us. Maggie was a charge nurse from my hospital. She was smart, practical, and fiercely loyal. If something felt wrong, Maggie usually noticed first. When we arrived, Patricia greeted me with a stiff smile. Tanya Jason, she said. Nothing more. No warmth. No excitement. Just my name. I handed her a birthday gift. She barely looked at it. Across the terrace, I noticed Patricia and Brooke standing together near the bar. Their heads were close. They were speaking quietly. The moment I approached, they stopped. Immediately. Like children caught doing something they shouldn't. Maggie noticed it too. They were talking about something, she whispered. I laughed it off. They probably weren't. But deep down, I knew she was right. Adam eventually found me carrying 2 drinks. He smiled. We'll tell everyone after the birthday toast. I nodded. My heart was racing. I kept touching my purse to make sure the ultrasound photo was still there. I wanted everything to be perfect. I wanted this memory forever. At 9 o'clock, the birthday cake arrived. Everyone gathered around. Patricia made her wish. People clapped. The musicians played softly. Then Adam tapped his glass. The room became quiet. He looked at me and smiled. For one brief moment, I felt completely happy. We have some news, Adam announced. His voice shook with excitement. We're having a baby. Gasps filled the terrace. People smiled. Several relatives started clapping. Maggie looked ready to cry. For exactly 1 second, it was everything I had dreamed about. Then Patricia placed her champagne glass on the table. The sharp click echoed across the terrace. Everyone went silent. She slowly turned toward me. Then she spoke. "There is no baby." The entire terrace froze. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because I couldn't believe what I'd heard. Surely she was joking. But Patricia wasn't smiling. She looked completely serious. "There is no baby," she repeated. "Only a price tag." The words hit me like ice water. People exchanged uncomfortable looks. Nobody knew what to say. Patricia stood up. "My son is worth $10 million, she announced loudly. "And suddenly there's a pregnancy." She looked directly at me. How convenient. The silence became unbearable. Adam looked shocked. "Mom, stop." But his voice sounded weak. Patricia ignored him. She pointed at me. "Real mothers don't need 10 million reasons." My stomach dropped. I could barely breathe. The ultrasound photo suddenly felt heavy inside my purse. I wanted to pull it out. I wanted to prove her wrong. But something inside me said not to. Not like this. Not in front of everyone. "I'm 8 weeks pregnant," I said calmly. "I've seen the heartbeat." Patricia stepped closer. Her expression frightened me. Not because she looked angry. Because she looked certain. Like she truly believed I was lying. Like she had already decided I was guilty. "You've been planning this since the day you met him," she said. The careful nurse. The perfect little act. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Patricia, I'm not doing this here." "Then prove it." Her voice became louder. "Show everyone. Right now." I felt the stone planter wall behind me. The crowd had grown completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody helped. Everyone simply watched. As if this were entertainment. As if my life were a show. Gerald finally spoke. "Patricia, enough." But he sounded weak. Like a man who had spent years losing arguments. Adam stood frozen. Not helping me. Not stopping her. Just standing there. I looked Patricia directly in the eyes. "There is a baby," I said. "And someday you'll meet your grandchild." Her face tightened. Then she took another step toward me. "Prove it." And in that moment everything changed. Patricia stepped closer. "Prove it." Those two words hung in the air. I could feel every eye on me. 30 people stood around us watching. Nobody stepped in. Nobody stopped her. The stone planter wall pressed against the back of my legs. Maggie was trying to move through the crowd toward me, but there were too many people. Everyone seemed frozen. I looked straight at Patricia. "There is a baby," I said. "And someday you'll meet your grandchild whether you apologize or not." For a split second, I thought she might back down. Instead, her face hardened. Then she reached toward me. Later, people argued about exactly what happened. Some claimed she only wanted my purse. Others claimed she wanted the ultrasound photo. But the truth was simple. She shoved me. Both hands. Hard. Her palms slammed into my shoulders. The stone wall caught the back of my knees. The world tilted. Someone screamed my name. The lights above me spun. Then I was falling. Thankfully, I didn't fall 11 stories. But I did fall 10 feet into the lower garden patio. And 10 feet was enough. I hit the ground hard. Pain exploded through my body. I heard my wrist break before I felt it. A horrible snapping sound. My ribs slammed into stone. The air rushed from my lungs. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't move. Only one thought remained. My baby. Above me, chaos erupted. People shouted. Chairs scraped across the floor. Someone yelled for an ambulance. Then Adam appeared above the wall. For the first time all night, he moved. He scrambled down toward me, nearly falling himself. He reached me and grabbed my hand. His whole body shook. "Don't move," he kept saying. "Don't move." He was crying. "The baby. Oh God, the baby." Maggie arrived seconds later. Unlike everyone else, she stayed calm. Years of nursing had trained her for moments like this. She dropped to her knees beside me. "Tanya, Jason, talk to me." Her voice was steady. "Where does it hurt?" I tried to answer. The pain made it difficult. Then I remembered something. The photo. Maggie looked confused. The ultrasound. I pointed weakly toward my purse. Zip pocket. Without asking questions, she found it. A moment later she held up the small ultrasound picture. It was dirty now. Covered with dust and dirt from the fall. But it was still there. "Got it," she said softly. "Now hold on." The ambulance arrived. Everything after that became a blur of lights, sirens, and pain. As they wheeled me into the emergency room, I realized something terrifying. I knew too much. I understood hospitals. I knew which looks doctors exchanged when they were worried. I knew which silences were dangerous. That knowledge made everything scarier. Tests started immediately. A doctor examined my wrist. A nurse checked my ribs. Then came the moment I feared most. Checking the baby. The room became quiet. The Doppler machine touched my stomach. Static filled the air. Nothing. More static. My heart pounded. Then suddenly. A heartbeat. Fast. Strong. Beautiful. The room seemed to breathe again. I burst into tears. The baby's heart was beating perfectly. 158 beats per minute. Strong. Healthy. Alive. I covered my mouth and cried. Not because I was scared anymore. Because I was grateful. The doctors found a small bleed that required monitoring. They wanted to keep me in the hospital. But my daughter was okay. At that moment, nothing else mattered. Across the room, Adam stood holding the dirty ultrasound photo. He looked broken. His phone kept vibrating. Over and over. Every few minutes, he checked it. Even while I lay in a hospital bed. Even while our child fought to stay safe. He kept checking his phone. At the time, I didn't understand why. Later, I would. 3 days later, I learned the answer. Around 1 in the morning, I heard Adam talking in the hallway. He thought I was asleep. But nurses rarely sleep in hospitals. We simply close our eyes. I listened through the slightly open door. "It happened so fast," Adam whispered. A pause. Then another sentence. "I don't think Mom pushed her exactly." My entire body went cold. Exactly. One word. One tiny word. But it changed everything. He wasn't telling the truth. He was already trying to soften it. Trying to make it sound less serious. Trying to protect Patricia. While I lay in a hospital bed with a broken wrist. I quietly lifted my hospital gown. The bruises on my shoulders were still there. Clear handprints. I photographed them. Documentation. Evidence. Years of nursing had taught me something important. Feelings fade. Records remain. When Adam came back inside, I asked who he had been speaking with. "My family." I nodded. Then I said something simple. "Your mother put me in this bed." He looked away. "We don't know that." The words hurt more than my broken wrist. "We don't know that." As if there had been another explanation. As if gravity had pushed me. As if walls attacked people by themselves. Something cracked inside me that night. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Like glass. 3 days later I was discharged. Adam drove me home. The ride was mostly silent. When we arrived, something strange happened. The Whitlocks showed up. Uninvited. They sat in my living room. On furniture I had purchased. Inside a house I had worked years to afford. Patricia didn't come. She sent Brooke. Brooke sat perfectly straight. Like someone reading from a script. We think there's a version of this story that protects everyone. I stared at her. Then she explained. According to Brooke, I had staged everything. I had supposedly thrown myself off the wall. 8 weeks pregnant. Broken my own wrist. Risked my baby's life. All for sympathy and money. The story was ridiculous. But Brooke said it with complete confidence. As if she'd practiced it. As if the family had discussed it already. I looked around the room. Gerald stared at the floor. Adam stayed silent. Again. That silence told me everything. I asked only one question. If I staged it, who broke my wrist? Brooke had no answer. She simply stood up. Smoothed her dress. And repeated the same line. We're trying to help you. After they left, Maggie came over. She brought takeout food and a legal pad. That was very Maggie. She listened while I vented. Then she interrupted. Enough. I blinked. What? She tapped the legal pad. They want you angry. I thought about that. She was right. If I screamed and fought, they'd call me emotional. Unstable. Difficult. Then Maggie said something that changed everything. You don't win this by yelling. Then how? She smiled. The same way you chart patient records. I stared at her. With documentation. Exactly. We began making a list. Hospital records. Photos. Medical reports. Bruise pictures. Witnesses. Evidence. Then Maggie said 3 words. There were cameras. I looked up. She was right. The hotel had cameras. Hotels always had cameras. My heart started beating faster. For the first time since the fall, I felt hope. Not emotional hope. Practical hope. The kind built on facts. A few days later, Adam visited. He claimed he came for clothes. But I knew better. He came to deliver a message. Please let this go. I stared at him. The cameras. The lawyers. The investigation. His voice grew quieter. Don't destroy this family. Finally, I understood. The money. Everything came back to the money. Patricia controlled it. Adam depended on it. If he chose me, he risked losing everything. I asked him a simple question. What happens if I tell the truth? He didn't answer. His silence answered for him. I changed the locks the following Monday. With one hand, it took nearly an hour. But I finished. That same week, everything changed. A text message arrived by accident. Brooke accidentally added me to a family group chat. A chat I wasn't supposed to see. Within minutes she removed me. But it was too late. The messages had already downloaded. I started reading. My stomach dropped. The conversation began 9 days before the birthday party. 9 days. Before. Patricia had planned everything. She had written messages discussing me. Discussing the pregnancy. Planning the confrontation. One message stood out. We need to handle the Tanya Jason situation at the party. Another. Make her prove it in front of everyone. I kept scrolling. The evidence was overwhelming. This wasn't an emotional outburst. It wasn't an accident. It was a plan. A carefully organized public humiliation. I didn't call anyone. Didn't argue. Didn't post screenshots online. Instead, I backed everything up. 3 copies. Different locations. Then I hired a lawyer. Her name was Joan Reyes. Joan studied every document carefully. The medical records. The bruises. The messages. The ultrasound photos. Then she looked up. "Tanya Jason, this is serious." She explained something I hadn't considered. Patricia didn't simply embarrass me. She assaulted a pregnant woman. That changed everything. Then Joan smiled. And pointed at the prenup. "The best evidence is actually this." I frowned. "The prenup?" She nodded. "The family accused you of chasing $10 million. She tapped the paper. "This legally prevents you from getting any of it." I stared at the document. Suddenly, I understood. The very paper they created to protect themselves now proved I was innocent. Weeks later, the hotel footage arrived. Joan warned me before showing it. I watched anyway. The video was clear. Painfully clear. There was no confusion. No misunderstanding. No accident. Patricia shoved me. Everyone could see it. The footage showed exactly 11 seconds where Adam stood frozen and did nothing. 11 seconds. The incident report from the hotel matched perfectly. The manager. A server. Multiple witnesses. All telling the same story. The lie collapsed. Then the criminal investigation began. The detective assigned to the case reviewed everything. The messages. The footage. The witness statements. The medical records. Finally she looked at me. This was planned. The words felt heavy. But they were true. Patricia was charged. The news spread quickly. For the first time, the truth was bigger than the Whitlock family. Bigger than money. Bigger than influence. Adam visited one final time. He sat on my porch and cried. Real tears. He admitted everything. He admitted his mother was wrong. He admitted the video proved it. Then I asked one question. "Will you tell the truth publicly?" He froze. The answer was written across his face. Fear won. Again. "I can't." That was it. That was the moment my marriage truly ended. Not on the terrace. Not in the hospital. Right there on the porch. A man who knew the truth and still refused to speak it. Months passed. Eventually I learned why Patricia hated me so much. Years earlier, a woman had taken advantage of Patricia's brother. Money had been lost. Lives had been damaged. Patricia never recovered from it. She spent decades convincing herself she was protecting her family. Unfortunately, she saw that old woman every time she looked at me. She never saw Tanya Jason. Only a ghost from her past. I understood her pain. But understanding didn't excuse what she did. At 20 weeks pregnant, I attended another ultrasound. This time, I went alone. The screen showed a healthy baby girl. Tiny fingers. Tiny feet. A perfect little heartbeat. "It's a girl," the technician said. I smiled. Then I cried. Not from sadness. From love. That day I made a promise. Nobody would decide who my daughter became except her. Not Patricia. Not Adam. Not anyone. Eventually the legal conference arrived. Patricia entered the room like she still controlled everything. She expected to win. She expected everyone to believe her. She was wrong. Joan opened the folder. One document at a time. The ultrasound photos. The medical records. The security footage. The witness reports. The family group chat. Finally, the prenup. Each piece destroyed another lie. Patricia grew quieter. Then louder. Then angry. Then emotional. Nothing worked. The evidence spoke for itself. At one point she stood and shouted, "I was protecting this family." Maybe she believed it. Maybe she always would. But the truth remained unchanged. She had shoved a pregnant woman. Nothing could erase that. When the meeting ended, everything happened quickly. Patricia lost control of the trust. The criminal charges remained. The divorce moved forward. Custody was awarded to me. The settlement covered my injuries. And the truth finally won. My daughter Ren was born in March. 7 pounds. Healthy. Beautiful. Perfect. The first time I held her, I cried. Not because of everything we had survived. But because she was finally here. Today, life is quiet. Exactly the way I like it. I still live in my little brick house. The porch is still crooked. I still work as a labor and delivery nurse. Maggie is Ren's godmother. She visits often. Sometimes we sit outside together while Ren sleeps. And sometimes we simply enjoy the peace. The 2 ultrasound photos sit framed in my bedroom. The first one. And the second one. The accusation. And the answer. Side by side. People sometimes ask if I regret staying calm. If I wish I had screamed at Patricia. The answer is no. For 1 second on that terrace, I wanted to. But screaming was exactly what she expected. The truth didn't need screaming. The truth only needed proof. I never wanted $10 million. I never needed $10 million. I built my life myself. And nobody gets to turn that life into a price tag. Not anymore. Ren will grow up knowing something important. Her mother stayed calm. Her mother kept records. Her mother told the truth. And when powerful people tried to bury that truth, it survived anyway. Because truth doesn't need shouting. It only needs courage. And sometimes, a folder full of receipts. That's the lesson I carried away from that terrace. 1 lie. 1 fall. 1 family destroyed by its own choices. And 1 little girl who became the best thing that ever happened to me.